Welcome back, everyone. This week we are diving into a case, well, it left a permanent stain on the UK, really, Mick Philpott. But before we get into it, a quick reminder that this deep dive is sponsored by TopNaturalHealth.com. They have natural ways to help you feel your best physically and mentally. And listeners to this deep dive get a special promo code, so listen out for that later.
Right into it, then.
Yeah, so Mick Philpott. This isn't just any crime story, though, is it? It's a twisted tale of manipulation and greed, ending in a tragedy that shocked a nation.
What always gets me is how this case goes beyond just the one guy, you know? It makes us think about how someone could exploit the system, manipulate everyone around them, and it makes us ask, well, what is our responsibility as a society to protect the vulnerable?
You're right, it really makes you think. So on May 11th, 2012, a house fire in Derby, England, claimed the lives of 6 children, Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, Jaden, and Dwayne. And their father, Mick Philpott, he immediately became this grieving dad. But as the investigation went on, well, a much darker picture emerged.
The thing is, this wasn't some isolated thing with Mick Philpott. He had a history of violence that you just can't ignore. Like back in 1978, he attacked his girlfriend then, Kim Hill, stabbed her multiple times.
Yeah, I read about that. It's chilling 27 stab wounds. And he only served a tiny bit of a sentence for that.
It makes you wonder, were there any chances to stop this? Was there something in his past, maybe, or in his mind, that showed he was capable of this violence and manipulation?
It's true. And going deeper into his life, the pattern's even more clear. This man had 17 children with 5 different women.
That's always really stood out to me. Some people might just think about the welfare system, but for me, it makes me wonder about what was going on in his head. Maybe having all those children with different women was a way to control things, like creating chaos only he could deal with.
I've never thought about it like that. Makes you think about what makes someone want a family structure like that. Was it about money, as some people said, or was there something more going on, some need for control and manipulation?
It was probably a bit of both. Philpott loved the attention, didn't he? Appearing on all those talk shows and coming across as a kind of unconventional dad. But really, he was hiding a much darker side.
And that's what I find so fascinating and disturbing about this whole thing. He manipulated the system, sure, but he also manipulated everyone watching. He really did pull the wool over everyone's eyes for a while there.
Yeah, and it all kind of unraveled with Lisa Willis, one of the women who lived with him. Her deciding to leave really seems to have set this whole thing in motion.
When she left, she took her 5 kids with her, right? And that was a big loss of control for Philpott, wasn't it? It seems like he saw people as just, I don't know, pawns in his game.
Yeah, and of course it would have been a blow to his finances, too.
I mean, it's insane to think this way, but it seems like he cared more about what he was getting out of it than the well-being of his own kids.
Right. And that's where it gets really tragic, because he was so desperate to get that control back, and he just didn't care about other people. That's what led him to do something so awful.
The house fire. That was his plan, wasn't it? To frame Lisa Willis. And it ended up costing the lives of 6 innocent children.
It's just... the whole thing was reckless, wasn't it? He really thought he could control everything, that it would all go exactly the way he wanted it to.
And those poor children. Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, Jaden, and Dwayne, they were so young. And their lives were cut short because of their own father's greed. It's difficult to even imagine what they went through.
It really makes you think about how vulnerable children are, doesn't it? And what happens when adults put their own needs above everything else.
It really does. I remember when this case was all over the news, everyone was talking about it. And at first people felt sorry for Philpott. He was so convincing as the grieving father, going on TV and everything.
He knew exactly how to manipulate people, how to use their emotions to make himself seem like the victim.
But behind the scenes, the police were starting to put the pieces together, weren't they? Noticing things that didn't add up, like his behavior at the time of the fire at those press conferences. It just wasn't right.
And that's often how the truth comes out, isn't it? Those little things, the inconsistencies. The investigators, they didn't buy into his act. They looked into his past, his relationships, his finances.
And that's when they planted those listening devices in his house and car. And those recordings, they were a game changer. What were they hearing? Did it match up with the grieving father he wanted everyone to believe he was? We'll find out right after this quick message from our sponsor, TopNaturalHealth.com. Dealing with stress and anxiety, Top Natural Health has a range of natural remedies to help you find your calm. From calming herbal teas to essential oils that promote relaxation and sleep, head to their website and use code DEEPDIVEVE for a special discount, just for listeners of this deep dive. So they had him. With those recordings, what were they actually hearing on them?
It's hard to listen to, honestly. He wasn't sorry, not really. Not for losing his children. He talked about the fire like it was nothing, just a little setback on the way to getting what he wanted.
I can't even imagine.
He actually talked about how the fire would make things better for him.
It's just, how can anyone be so selfish to care more about that than your own children?
And that's what shocked everyone, I think. It wasn't just a crime, it was like, he threw away something precious. Those recordings meant there was no way out. He had to go to trial.
The whole country was watching. Every little detail. Everyone was talking about it. You could tell how angry people were, disgusted by what he'd done.
He thought he could get away with it, but it all caught up with him.
And the jury saw through his act, didn't they? He was found guilty, manslaughter, and got a life sentence.
And his wife, Mayor Ed, she got a long sentence too, and so did his friend, Paul Mosley. They were both found guilty.
It started a lot of conversations, didn't it? About personal responsibility. And what about the system? Did it make it too easy for him to take advantage?
Yeah. Some people said that Philpott was only able to do what he did because of the system. That it was too easy for him to manipulate it, to benefit from having so many children.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Where do you draw the line? How do you help those who need it without it being abused?
It's a balance, isn't it? And this case really showed how difficult that balance is to get right.
It certainly does. You know, it's easy to think of these big cases, these awful crimes, and just switch off. But there are real people at the heart of it all. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that you never really know what goes on behind closed doors, and that we always need to be looking out for each other, especially the most vulnerable.